And we're joined by Tom Huisman, the athletic director at UBCO. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Ryan.
I want to talk about this RBC Training Ground, but first, we had you in initially when you started in your role at UBCO. How's your first year and a half been? Have you seen some of these elite sports turning around a little bit? I've seen some improvement on the basketball court.
Yeah, I think we are turning the corner. Not to say that we weren't doing well before, but we definitely had some room for improvement. And I think we're at a spot now where, with some new coaching leadership in a number of our teams and a renewed commitment and focus in certain areas, that we're starting to make some strides, and optimistic that starting next year we'll have many more teams qualifying for playoffs, and then moving forward from there, hopefully competing for national championship qualification and seeing where things go from there.
All right, so on to this RBC Training Ground thing. What an interesting event. So there's this call out to young athletes, anyone who might consider themselves an athlete, to come in and get tested and find out if you've got what it takes to be an Olympian. Am I right?
Exactly. And so it's open to athletes aged 14 to 25, and they'll come in. It from start to finish takes about 2 hours, and they'll go through 4 basic testing stations that will measure their ability in power, speed, endurance, and one other that escapes my memory. But
basic athletic abilities, right?
Yeah.
And is there any particular kind of athlete, or there sports that tend to have the best athletes? Or?
No, and particularly for RBC Training Ground, it really is about getting athletes out, irrespective of what sport they're a part of. Okay. And so for us, there's some great stories of people who've come through the program who had no idea that they had an ability in the sport that they ended up being, and they're actually on pathways to be medal contenders in Tokyo this summer for Team Canada.
So looking at athletes of that age, if they start to show certain attributes that would work, I take it there's certain sports that are looking at this, right? You're not going to suddenly create a badminton player starting at age 17, but you might be able to make a rower or a cyclist.
Exactly, yeah. So for this go round, for this cycle of RBC Training Ground, which has been around, this is the 5th year, they've got 9 national sport organizations that are lined up. That's not to say others may not be interested, but there's 9 official NSO partners, and so they do come from sports like cycling, speed skating, and more individual focused sports. But not to say that there aren't others, because rugby is also one of the NSO partners. So it's not identification for every sport that's in the Olympics, but for a number of them, this is an opportunity that athletes may not have otherwise considered, or may not have even been exposed to that sport before. Because of its unique characteristics.
Right, and it seems like there's certain things that these sports have in common. These are the kinds of sports where you can really excel if you want to put in the time. If you to develop your strength and your endurance. These sorts of sports are for you. If you put in the hours, there's a good chance of rising to the top.
Yeah, and obviously what this program does, it helps identify those that have a natural aptitude to it already. They would have been developing some of those skills already, because it is open from ages 14 to 25. So obviously some people have been working on those skill elements.
Right.
But as well, it's open to 14 and 15-year-olds. And all of the testing, it's age based, so it's not as though the 14-year-old is competing against the 25-year-old.
Right.
It's all done through benchmarks that have been established by the national sport organizations and the Canadian Sport Institute organizations that have helped put the program together.
So you put the call out. Let's say you expect something in the neighborhood of 100, maybe more, will show up, and what happens after that? If certain athletes are found to have some real potential, where do they go from there?
So from there, there's a national finals event that happens at the end of May, and they'll take roughly the top 100 from throughout Canada. So we're one of 13 venues in Canada for RBC Training Ground this year, and they'll take the top 100 from all 13 venues, bring them into Winnipeg actually this year, and then they'll go through another series of testing, and there's up to 30 funded spots available for prospective future Olympians that RBC will help put together. And so far the tally from RBC is, I think it's around just over 100 and nearly 120 athletes have been identified and have received about $1.7 million in funding support to help them along their future path. And so we're hopeful that, there's people out in the Okanagan and Kelowna areas that, don't know it, but they could be representing Canada on the national and international stage.
So previous athletes have gone through this program and gotten funding. Have any come out the other end as Olympians?
Yeah. So one of the great examples that I like to always draw upon. There's a gal from Edmonton, Kelsey Mitchell, I believe was her name, and she was a soccer player. Played college and university soccer. Went to an RBC Training Ground event a few years ago, and ended up crushing some of the criterias and went on to went with further testing. Well, fast forward a couple of years, and she's on the national team track cycling, broke a world record last fall. And at the time in 2017, when she attended that RBC Training Ground event in Edmonton, actually I think she was in Toronto, but she hadn't owned a bike since she was 12. So she wasn't a cyclist at the time. But through the testing and through this program was identified that, wow, she's got some potential here.
Yeah.
And as you say, she put in the work, put in the effort, and next thing you know, she's a world record holder and a medal hopeful for Canada in Tokyo in 2020.
Fantastic. So this is on the 29th, and people can pre-register or just show up?
Yeah, so Saturday the 29th, people can, as you say, register. It's at rbctrainingground.ca. Otherwise, they can just show up at the gym at the UBCO campus and sign up right then and there.
Fantastic. Thanks for telling us about it, Tom Huisman. And thank you for watching Kelowna Now.